We're never going to have a marriage relationship anymore. This is my story too, and I have the right to tell my story.
For 30 years, Meri Brown lived inside a story built on faith, loyalty, and silence. In the quiet corners of a family that called itself united, she waited for love to feel equal. Her voice, once gentle, became her greatest weapon. The day came when the silence cracked, when the courtroom became her battlefield, and the truth finally demanded to be heard. She believed every word Cody Brown ever said, every promise about family, every sermon about spiritual equality, every plan for their land at Coyote Pass. But hidden in that same land, buried beneath contracts, deeds, and family trusts, was the proof that everything she had believed was built on sand. For decades, the world saw the smiling family on Sister Wives, the happy polygamous dream, the spiritual harmony, the promises of faith. But behind the cameras, a war was brewing. Meri had been the loyal wife, the woman who held everything together, even when her name was missing from the things she helped build. She gave her income, her energy, her devotion, and still, her name wasn't on the deed. When she walked into that Arizona courtroom, it wasn't about real estate anymore. It was about dignity. The air was tight, the sound of footsteps echoed like thunder, and the eyes of everyone in the gallery followed her. Robin, Janelle, even Cody himself, sitting with folded arms, jaw locked. She didn't flinch. Not when he looked at her, not when she saw the man who had promised her an equal life twist that promise into control. The judge's gavel dropped, and Meri's voice finally filled the room. Calm, steady, trembling with years of restraint, she spoke of loyalty, of betrayal, of a 12-acre dream that had turned into a symbol of deceit. Coyote Pass, once the promise of a shared family future, had become a battlefield of signatures and erased names. Online, fans were already calling it justice. Hashtags spread across timelines, tweets shouting support. She deserves better. 30 years of manipulation exposed, Cody's mask finally off. But Meri didn't come for applause. She came for truth. Every story has a hero and a villain. In this one, the villain didn't need horns or anger, just quiet authority and the belief that control meant love. Cody Brown, the man who preached leadership and faith, built his kingdom on her silence. And Meri, the first wife, the believer, was the foundation he'd taken for granted. In old footage, his voice still lingers. I don't feel married to Meri anymore. To the world, it was a confession. To her, it was an execution. Long before the show, before fame, there was a 19-year-old girl who believed in shared dreams. Meri Brown stood in a modest ceremony, believing in unity, in family, in love that would last. But what she didn't know was that the story she was entering was never hers to tell. TLC would frame her as the quiet wife. Cody would define her as the loyal one. But she was neither quiet nor weak. She was waiting for the day when silence would no longer protect the truth. Waiting for the moment to show the world that faith can build a family or bury one. And now, after 30 years of being told to wait her turn, Meri Brown had finally stopped waiting. She wasn't just speaking, she was roaring. The documents were real. The betrayal was real. The silence was over. What comes next would not only rewrite her marriage but reshape everything the world thought it knew about sister wives. Meri Brown never planned to become a fighter. But when she opened the documents in her hand, she saw proof that 30 years of devotion had been turned into a paper trail of deceit. The words on those pages didn't just expose numbers or signatures. They exposed a lifetime of lies. The courtroom was quiet, a silence so sharp it could slice through air. Janelle sat beside her, eyes burning with the same disbelief. Between them lay the map of Coyote Pass, a 12-acre stretch of Arizona soil that once represented unity, now divided by greed. It was supposed to be their future, for homes for 4 wives, an equal inheritance for everyone who helped build it. But equality had never been real. When Meri compared the deeds, her name wasn't there. Neither was Janelle's. Only 2 names repeated over and over again, Cody Brown and Robin Brown. That was the moment everything shifted. Meri's voice trembled as she whispered to Janelle, "He erased us." It wasn't a mistake. It was a decision. She remembered the conversations years ago by the fire pit, Cody talking about dreams, legacy, unity. He promised, "We'll each have a home, a view, our own space, but together, always." Those words had felt sacred then. Now, they felt like poison. When the truth sank in, Meri's heart didn't break, it hardened. Robin sat behind Cody, her head bowed, eyes darting across the room. To the world, she was the innocent wife, the calm mother, the one who tried to keep peace. But inside that courtroom, innocence had no face. Emails surfaced, messages between Robin and the real estate attorney that changed everything. One line echoed through the room like a slap: "We don't want the other wives to make it messy." Better if we finalize everything before they notice. Mary's attorney read it aloud. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Robin went pale. Cody stiffened in his seat. Meri turned to face them both. Her eyes didn't shake. "You lied to me," she said softly, "for 30 years. Cody avoided her gaze. His jaw flexed, a small muscle betraying the fury behind his silence. For decades, he had controlled the story, managed the narrative, smiled through interviews, promising unity while building his empire on control. He had used spiritual language to cover legal betrayal. The judge watched closely. "Mrs. Brown," she asked, "are you claiming that your name was deliberately excluded from ownership?" "Yes," Meri replied, her voice rising from steady to sharp. "He told me it was ours, the family's. But behind closed doors, he made sure I owned nothing." The gallery leaned forward. Cody's lawyer jumped in, insisting it was business, that Meri didn't contribute financially like he did. But Mary's attorney, a calm woman in a tan suit, stood and answered with precision. "Your Honor, the Brown family's finances were deliberately merged. Every dollar earned from the show, every appearance, every business, it was shared. Mary's income contributed directly to that land." A low murmur filled the courtroom. Janelle nodded slowly beside her. They had both known something was wrong for months, but seeing it laid bare, that was different. The betrayal wasn't sudden. It had grown, like rust on metal, hidden beneath smiles and spiritual sermons. Meri remembered every moment she was told to have faith. She remembered waiting for Cody to change, to love her again, to notice her sacrifice. She remembered him saying, "Trust me, I know what I'm doing." Now she knew what he had been doing all along. The courtroom felt smaller. The truth hung heavy in the air. Meri unfolded a copy of a payment receipt, $18,200 wired from her boutique's earnings into the family trust for Coyote Pass. "This," she said, holding it up, "was supposed to secure my part of the property. Instead, I was told it didn't matter." Cody shifted in his chair. "I advanced the funds," he snapped. "I paid for 92% of that land." Mary's lawyer leaned forward. "With whose earnings, Mr. Brown? From whose work? From whose image?" Silence. Everyone knew the answer. The money came from the show, the family's show, built on their stories, their pain, their faces, built on Mary's quiet suffering. Cody's confidence began to crack. His voice dropped. "She was never interested in building there," he muttered. Mary's head turned sharply. "You told me I would always be your wife. You told me that land was our family's legacy." The gallery went silent again. The only sound was the faint hum of cameras from outside the courthouse. Robin finally spoke, voice trembling. "I didn't mean for this to happen. I just thought." Meri cut her off. "You thought what? That I wouldn't notice? That I'd stay quiet forever?" Robin's eyes filled with tears, but they weren't enough to change the truth written on paper. The judge leaned forward. "Mr. and Mrs. Brown," she said carefully, "what I see here is a deliberate pattern, promises made, but not honored." Meri closed her eyes for a moment, breathing deeply. She wasn't angry anymore. She was exhausted, 30 years of endurance turning into resolve. Outside, the media was already spinning the headlines. Meri Brown's courtroom showdown, the betrayal at Coyote Pass, 30 years of silence ends in fire. Inside, Mary's transformation was just beginning. The faithful wife had become the woman reclaiming her worth. As the hearing paused for recess, Janelle whispered, "You did it. You showed them." Meri nodded, staring at the empty witness stand. "No," she said quietly, "I just showed the truth." The judge called for a short break. Cody stood, shoulders tense, whispering to his lawyer. Robin kept her head down. The audience buzzed with tension. Meri turned toward the courtroom door, her silhouette framed by the pale Arizona light. She had walked into that room as the forgotten wife. She was walking out as the woman who finally demanded justice. The next act would not be about proof. It would be about consequence. What happens when 30 years of control finally meets accountability? Stay with us. The truth has only just begun to speak. The courtroom was silent when Robin Brown's name was called. Every movement stopped. Even the faint rustle of paper seemed too loud. Reporters leaned forward, pens hovering. Fans watching from outside the courthouse pressed closer to their screens. When Robin stood, she looked smaller than anyone had ever seen her. Her eyes were red. Her hands trembled. For years, she'd been the favorite wife, the calm one, the peacekeeper. But peacekeepers don't survive when the truth catches up. The judge's voice cut through the air. "Mrs. Robin Brown, please take the stand." She walked slowly, heels clicking on the floor. Every step echoed like guilt in a hollow room. Her cardigan sleeve trembled as she adjusted the microphone. She swore to tell the truth. But truth was exactly what she'd spent years trying to avoid. The attorney's first question was simple. "Mrs. Brown, can you explain your role in the Coyote Pass property transfer?" Robin hesitated. It was always my belief that the land belonged to all of us, she said, voice shaking. That's what Cody told us. The lawyer nodded. So you were aware that Meri and Janelle believed they were equal owners? At first, yes. Robin's voice fell to a whisper. But then things changed. People started leaving. Christine moved on. Meri became distant. Janelle was angry. I thought I was the only one still committed to the dream. The lawyer's tone sharpened. And yet you signed documents that left their names off the deeds, correct? Robin's eyes darted to Cody. I signed what I was told to sign, she said quickly. I left the legalities to him. The lawyer leaned in. You didn't notice your name was on 3 lots, and theirs were missing? Robin blinked fast. I didn't know. Not really. Meri watched from her seat. Every word felt like an old wound reopening. She had lived 3 decades of silence, and now she was hearing excuses dressed as innocence. The attorney held up a printed email, the same one the world would later screenshot and share online. Mrs. Brown, this email. We don't want the other wives to make it messy. Better if we finalize before they notice. Did you write it? Robin's voice broke. Yes, but I didn't mean it like that. I meant emotionally messy. A gasp rolled through the gallery. Cameras flashed outside. Meri's lawyer spoke firmly. Intention is one thing. Responsibility is another. You signed away 2 women's ownership of property they helped to pay for. Robin's composure cracked. I trusted him, she cried. I trusted Cody to handle everything. I didn't want to hurt anyone. Meri didn't blink. She simply stared. For 30 years, she had watched Robin cry on camera, watched the world call her kind, soft, forgiving. Now those tears fell differently. They fell heavy with guilt. The judge's voice cut through again. Mrs. Brown, whether by trust or by choice, you benefited from decisions that excluded others. That is a matter of law, not emotion. Robin's head dropped. The courtroom went quiet again. Cody's turn came next. He walked to the stand like a man preparing for battle. His jaw clenched, his body tight with anger. For years, he had spoken with authority, controlled every conversation, every family meeting, every camera angle. But this time, the room wasn't his. The judge's question came fast. Mr. Brown, did you tell Meri that her name would remain on the deed? Cody's voice hardened. I didn't think she was interested anymore. She didn't want to build there. Meri's lawyer stepped forward. And yet she contributed money directly from her business. She paid property taxes. Are these her bank transfers? Cody looked down at the stack of papers. Yes, so she did invest. Yes, he said through his teeth. The room shifted. The audience knew what that meant. Meri sat still, her hands folded in her lap. There was no triumph in her eyes, only exhaustion. This wasn't about revenge. It was about truth finally taking shape in public view. Cody's tone grew defensive. I paid most of it. 92%. I had to control things or it would have fallen apart. The attorney didn't blink. Control is not ownership, Mr. Brown. Especially when that control is exercised through deception. Robin covered her face. The fans behind the ropes outside could hear faint sobs through the courthouse microphones. Cody tried to recover his footing, talking about faith, leadership, family structure, but his words began to unravel. Every justification sounded hollow. Every attempt to reframe sounded desperate. The judge interrupted. Mr. Brown, leadership without integrity is manipulation. The sentence hung in the air. Cody froze. Meri finally spoke. Her voice was calm, almost tender. He lied to me for 30 years. Not because he had to, but because he could. The courtroom was silent. Even the clerk stopped writing. Cody looked at her, his expression unreadable. For the first time, he looked smaller, the leader stripped of his throne. Outside, news networks were already cutting the footage into sound bites. Meri's explosive testimony. Cody cornered. Robin breaks down in court. But inside that room, the real explosion wasn't loud. It was quiet, the sound of power collapsing. The session ended for the day. Meri stood slowly, her lawyer beside her, Janelle waiting near the back. Reporters shouted questions as they left, cameras flashing. One reporter called out, Meri, do you feel vindicated? She paused at the courthouse steps, the Arizona sun hitting her face. I don't feel vindicated, she said softly. I feel free. Behind her, Robin and Cody walked out separately. Robin's head was down. Cody didn't speak. For the first time in years, there was no camera smile left between them. Meri stepped forward into the noise of microphones and headlines. The hero and villain had both been unmasked. But the story wasn't over. The next part of this saga wouldn't be about exposure. It would be about aftermath. What happens when truth is out, but healing hasn't begun? When power shifts, but the pain remains? The world would soon find out. Stay with us. The breaking point is still to come. This section captures the emotional collapse, the turning point where truth becomes pain, and where every character faces the consequences of what's been exposed. Written in plain text, with NLP-rich narrative flow and emotional realism, consistent with your tone and entities. Meri, Cody, Robin, Janelle, courtroom, justice, guilt, identity, transformation. The courtroom was different that morning. The air had changed. The whispers were gone. The crowd wasn't buzzing anymore. It was holding its breath. Everyone knew this was the end game, the moment when the masks would finally fall. Meri Brown walked in quietly, dressed in dark blue, her posture unbroken. Janelle was beside her again, a quiet ally in a war neither woman ever asked for. Across the aisle, Cody sat rigid, jaw locked, his face pale with defiance. Robin was next to him, red-eyed, mascara fading under courtroom lights. She clutched a tissue that she never seemed to use. It had been days of testimony, of papers, of arguments over who paid what, who owned what, who loved who. But today wasn't about money anymore. It was about the truth that came after lies. The judge entered, her gavel hitting once. The sound was final. Meri's lawyer stood. "Your Honor," she said, "my client has lived 3 decades under the weight of promises that never became reality. This case isn't about property. It's about pattern, a pattern of control disguised as faith." Cody's lawyer countered instantly, voice sharp. "Mr. Brown has provided for his family. He acted within his rights." Meri didn't move. Her eyes never left the judge. The lawyer continued, "Providing is not ownership, and leadership is not domination." Meri Brown contributed emotionally, financially, spiritually, and was deliberately excluded. That is the definition of betrayal, both moral and legal. Cody's lawyer objected, but the judge overruled him. When the time came for Meri to speak, the room shifted again. She rose slowly, a faint tremor in her hand, but her voice was steady. "For 30 years, I believed we were equals. I believed love was enough. I was wrong." She paused, breathing in the silence. "I was told to trust, to wait, to have faith. But faith doesn't write checks. Faith doesn't sign deeds. Faith doesn't erase my name from something I helped build." Robin covered her face again. Cody's hands clenched into fists. Meri continued, her voice rising. "He told me it was about unity. But unity never meant control. It meant sharing. It meant fairness. And when you take that away, when you rewrite promises in secret, you're not leading, you're lying." The judge listened, expression unreadable. The audience didn't move. Cameras clicked faintly in the hallway outside. Meri's voice softened. "He lied to me for 30 years. But I'm not here to destroy him. I'm here to stop destroying myself." The words hit harder than any accusation. Even Cody's lawyer lowered his gaze. Robin whispered something, barely audible. "I never wanted it like this." Meri looked at her. "Then you should have stopped him." For the first time, Robin had no tears left. The judge called for a recess, but nobody left their seats. It was as if the entire room was trapped in the gravity of truth. Cody stood up, breathing heavily, glaring at Meri across the courtroom. "You think you're innocent?" he spat quietly. "You think you didn't break this family first?" Meri didn't react. "Families don't break because of honesty," she said softly. "They break because of secrets." His expression faltered. Years of control began to crumble behind his eyes. Outside, fans gathered by the steps, holding signs. "Team Meri, justice for the first wife, truth over titles." The media trucks lined the street, anchors narrating live updates. Inside, Meri sat back down, her hands clasped tightly. She wasn't trembling anymore. She wasn't scared. She was tired, but she was also awake. The afternoon continued with closing arguments. Cody's lawyer tried to paint him as a man misunderstood, burdened by responsibility. But every word sounded empty now. Robin wouldn't look at him. Janelle sat silently, her hands folded, her face unreadable. When Cody took the stand one last time, his arrogance was gone. His voice cracked. "I did what I thought was best," he said. "I tried to lead." Meri's attorney asked one question. "Did you lie to her?" He hesitated. I told her what I thought she needed to hear." The judge raised her brow. "So yes?" Cody looked down. "Yes." A single word, but it carried 30 years of weight. The audience exhaled. Some even gasped. Robin began crying again, quietly this time, shoulders shaking. Meri closed her eyes, letting the truth settle like dust after a storm. The judge called a recess before the verdict. As the crowd filed out, Janelle touched Meri's shoulder. "You did it," she whispered. Meri shook her head. "No," she said softly. "I just stopped pretending." That night, the footage went viral. Clips of Meri's statement flooded social media. Fans called her brave. Others called it heartbreaking. But everyone agreed, it was the end of an era. Inside her hotel room, Meri sat by the window, the Arizona desert stretching endlessly outside. For the first time in years, she didn't feel trapped. She didn't feel small. She just felt real. Her phone buzzed. A message from Janelle. Tomorrow's the day. Meri typed back 2 words. I'm ready. Tomorrow, the judge would read the verdict. Tomorrow, the Brown family's illusion of unity would collapse completely. But tonight was quiet. The calm before the final truth. The woman who had been erased was now the one holding the pen. The final day arrived under a pale Arizona sun. The courthouse steps were already crowded. Reporters, fans, cameras, and whispers that carried like wind. Everyone wanted to see how 30 years of silence would end. Inside, the air was electric but quiet. The same courtroom that once held tension now held anticipation. Janelle sat in the front row beside Meri, their hands clasped loosely, neither woman speaking. Across the aisle, Cody leaned back, eyes fixed on the judge's empty seat. Robin was next to him, her face unreadable, the tissue in her hand shredded from nervous tears. Then the gavel struck. The room froze. The judge adjusted her glasses and began to read. This court finds that verbal, written, and financial agreements were made among all adult parties involved in the Coyote Pass acquisition and development. These agreements, while informal in some areas, were consistently represented to the public, the family, and the network as equal and binding. Meri didn't move, but Janelle's eyes closed, her lips trembling with relief. The judge continued, Miss Meri Brown and Miss Janelle Brown have proven through financial records, recorded media, and contractual commitments that they possess legitimate expectations of joint ownership. Robin's breath hitched. Cody's eyes darted toward the floor. The judge's voice grew stronger. Mr. Cody Brown, aided by Mrs. Robin Brown, knowingly conveyed and secured legal title to the land without fair disclosure or compensation to all parties. Therefore, this court orders that the Coyote Pass property be reappraised at current market value. Miss Meri Brown and Miss Janelle Brown shall each be financially reimbursed in equal share. The sum shall be remitted within 90 days or the property shall be sold and divided evenly, 25% to each of the 4 initial adult spouses. A wave of sound filled the room, gasps, whispers, a few cheers muffled by the judge's final words. This court is adjourned. Meri exhaled a slow, steady breath. 30 years of pain left her body in that moment, like smoke rising from the ashes. She didn't cry, she didn't cheer, she simply reached for Janelle's hand, and they stood together. Outside, the cameras swarmed, flashbulbs burst, reporters shouted questions over one another. Meri, how does it feel? Do you forgive Cody? What's next for you? She stopped at the podium set up outside the courthouse. The microphones crowded close. Behind her stood Janelle, her lawyers, and a quiet crowd of women, fans, supporters, strangers who had followed every episode, every heartbreak, every silence. Meri took a deep breath. I never wanted it to end here, she began, voice clear but heavy with emotion. I believed in this family. I gave everything I had, my time, my loyalty, my love, my silence. But silence doesn't build homes. Silence doesn't bring justice. And silence doesn't keep dignity alive. The crowd was silent. Only the cameras clicked. For 30 years, I believed love meant patience. But love without truth isn't love. It's control. And I won't live in control anymore. Reporters leaned closer. One asked, Meri, do you think Cody regrets it? She looked straight into the cameras. Maybe. But I stopped living for his regrets a long time ago. Applause broke through the crowd, not loud or dramatic, but honest, the sound of understanding. Meri smiled faintly. This isn't about revenge. It's about freedom. And I hope every woman watching this knows. You don't have to stay silent for someone else's peace. Her words spread across the internet within hours. Hashtag Justice for Meri trended again. Videos of her speech flooded TikTok. Fans called it the moment TLC couldn't script. Back home, in the quiet of her new house in Utah, Meri stood on the porch with a cup of coffee. The morning air was still. The light hit the mountains in the distance. This land, small, humble, and hers, was different. Every acre felt earned. Every breath felt honest. She set the coffee cup down on the railing. It read, I matter. She smiled. Janelle's car pulled into the driveway, dust trailing behind it. The 2 women stood together, looking out over the wide expanse of earth, silent but strong. Janelle spoke first. Feels good, doesn't it? Meri nodded. It feels real. There was no anger left, no bitterness, just peace, the kind that comes when truth finally outruns lies. Inside the house, her phone buzzed again. Messages from fans, from women she'd never met, thanking her for speaking out, for standing tall. You gave us strength, one message read. You showed us that faith can be reborn. Meri looked out toward the horizon. 30 years ago, she had walked into a family believing love meant obedience. Now she understood that love meant choice, the choice to walk away, to start over, to choose herself. She whispered quietly to herself, "He lied to me for 30 years. But now, I'm finally living the truth." The camera would fade on that image. Meri standing on her porch, sunlight on her face, the desert stretching endlessly behind her. The voiceover would close the story. Sometimes, freedom doesn't arrive with applause. It arrives quietly, when you finally decide that your voice matters more than their silence. Fade out. Months passed after the verdict, but the echo of that courtroom still lingered. Coyote Pass was no longer just land. It was a symbol, a scar turned lesson. Cody retreated from the spotlight, his voice quieter than the man who once commanded cameras. Robin stayed mostly unseen, choosing silence where she once sought sympathy. Janelle built a new business, her independence a quiet rebellion. And Meri, she kept moving. Her Utah home became more than a refuge, it became a statement. Every wall she painted, every coffee she poured on her porch was an act of rewriting her story. She started speaking publicly about control, faith, and forgiveness. Not forgiveness that excuses, but the kind that releases. Clips of her new podcast trended online. Healing isn't forgetting, it's remembering differently. Fans still sent messages. "You gave us courage. You made us believe we can start over." She always replied the same, "You can." One evening, under the orange wash of sunset, she looked out across the quiet Utah hills and smiled. For 30 years she had waited for permission to be heard. Now she didn't need it. The truth was hers, the peace was hers, and the future, finally, was hers too. Fade to black. Title card. Sometimes the greatest love story is learning to love yourself again. Night settled over the Utah hills. Meri sat alone on her porch, the desert wind whispering through the stillness. The coffee beside her had gone cold, untouched for hours. She had peace now, but not silence. Something inside her refused to rest. She opened her laptop. Old folders from the court case filled the screen. Financial records, deeds, contracts. She scrolled slowly, methodically, until one document caught her eye. It wasn't part of the original case. She didn't remember seeing it before. The date read, 3 months before the trial. And the signature at the bottom wasn't Cody's. It wasn't Robin's. It was someone else's. Her eyes narrowed. Her pulse began to race. "What is this?" she whispered. She clicked it open. The words were brief, but their meaning was clear. Something had been moved, something had been signed, and something had been hidden. A file she was never meant to find. She leaned back, breath caught in her throat. "This can't be real," she said softly. They weren't finished. The house creaked in the wind. The light above her flickered once, then steadied. In the distance, the sound of a car engine broke the quiet, faint at first, then closer, idling near the road below. Meri froze. She turned her head toward the sound, the glow of headlights cutting through the darkness. The engine stopped. Silence. A long, heavy silence. Her hand hovered over the laptop. The document was still open, the signature still staring back at her. She whispered again, barely audible, "Who signed this?" Cut to black. A single heartbeat. Then another. The narrator's voice returns, quiet and deliberate. "Some lies don't end in court." What Meri found next could change everything again. Sound builds. Low, tense music, rising heartbeat, faint echo of voices. Then silence. The final line, soft and haunting. "Some stories never end. They just wait to be told again." Pause. Then the call to action. If you think you know the truth, think again. Subscribe now, turn on notifications, and don't miss the next chapter in Meri Brown's untold story. Because sometimes, the biggest secrets come after the cameras stop rolling. Music fades out slowly, heartbeat echo lingering as the screen fades to black.